My drunk wife's confession hit harder than a wrecking ball. I was never attracted to you, and I've been sleeping with your rival architect. While I was designing skyscrapers and building our future, she was secretly destroying everything behind my back. That night, as she passed out in our perfectly designed bedroom, I made a decision that would shock the entire Chicago architecture scene. Some say revenge is best served cold. I say it's best served with precision planning and complete silence. No one expected the city's top architect to vanish overnight, leaving nothing but divorce papers and evidence of her betrayal. Life has a funny way of teaching us lessons, doesn't it? Sometimes you build something so high, you forget to check the foundation. I'm Daniel, one of Chicago's leading architects, or at least I was until everything came crashing down. But let me take you back to the beginning, because maybe my story will help someone else avoid building their life on shaky ground. I grew up with a drafting pencil in my hand and dreams of touching the sky. After graduating from the Illinois Institute of Technology's College of Architecture, I landed a position at one of Chicago's most prestigious architectural firms. Within 5 years, I became the youngest partner in the firm's history. My designs were reshaping the Chicago skyline, and my name was becoming synonymous with innovative, sustainable architecture. That's where I met Rebecca. She was an interior designer working on one of my major projects, a 60-story mixed-use tower in downtown Chicago. She had this incredible eye for detail and a vision that perfectly complemented mine. While I focused on the building's bones, she gave it a soul. Our first collaboration was magic, both professionally and personally. We clicked instantly. Late nights reviewing plans turned into dinner dates. Discussions about color schemes and spatial flow evolved into conversations about life, dreams, and our shared vision of the future. She understood my passion for architecture in a way no one else did. When I talked about wanting to leave a lasting mark on the city's skyline, she got it. She didn't just listen. She contributed, challenged my ideas, made them better. Our courtship was a whirlwind of blueprint reviews, site visits, and impromptu design sessions. I proposed to her at the top of the Willis Tower at sunset, with the whole city spread out below us like a blueprint of possibilities. The wedding was an architect's dream, held in a historic Frank Lloyd Wright building I'd helped restore. Every detail was perfectly planned, just like one of my buildings. After the wedding, my career hit overdrive. I landed the biggest project of my life, a revolutionary eco-friendly skyscraper that would redefine sustainable architecture. It was my chance to make history, to create something that would stand for generations. The pressure was enormous, but so was the potential reward. I threw myself into the work completely. 18-hour days became normal. I'd wake up before dawn to review plans, spend all day in meetings with contractors and city officials, and work late into the night perfecting every detail. My drafting table became my best friend, my computer my constant companion. I was building our future, creating a legacy that would set us up for life. The irony? While I was designing spaces for other people to live and work in, I was barely present in my own home. When I was there, my mind was usually still at the office, thinking about structural challenges or sustainability requirements. Rebecca would talk about her day, and I'd nod along while sketching ideas for the next day's meetings. Looking back now, I can see the warning signs I missed. The way Rebecca stopped sharing her design ideas with me. How our once passionate discussions about architecture became shorter and more superficial. The increasing number of client meetings she scheduled in the evenings. But I was too focused on reaching for the sky to notice the ground shifting beneath my feet. They say an architect should always think in 3 dimensions, but I was only focused on up the career ladder, up toward the next big project, up toward my dreams of architectural immortality. I forgot about the other dimensions of life, the ones that make a house a home, that make success worth having. Now I understand that while I was busy designing perfect spaces for others, I was letting my own space crumble. But you know what they say, hindsight is 20/20. By the time I realized my mistake, the blueprint of my life was already being redrawn in ways I never expected. I should have seen it coming. In my line of work, we have this saying, the devil's in the details. Man, if that isn't the truth about life too. Little things start going wrong, tiny cracks appear, and before you know it, you're dealing with a full-blown structural failure. It started about 6 months ago. I was burning the midnight oil on the eco skyscraper project, pulling all-nighters like I was back in architecture school. This building was going to be my magnum opus, a 90-story vertical garden that would put Chicago on the map for sustainable architecture. I was eating, sleeping, and breathing this project. Heck, I even had the blueprints taped to our bedroom wall. Talk about bringing your work home with you. Rebecca started making these little comments. You know, the kind that seem harmless at first but stick with you like gum on your shoe. Must be nice to be married to a building, she'd say with a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. Or, maybe you should design us some quality time into those perfect floor plans of yours. I was too caught up in my own world to read between the lines. When she stopped coming to my project presentations, I figured she was just busy with her own clients. When she started going to design conventions without me, I told myself it was good for her career. I was so wrapped up in creating my legacy that I couldn't see my present crumbling around me. One night, I came home late again, to find her sitting in our kitchen, this gorgeous space I designed specially for her love of cooking. She barely looked up from her wine glass. "Remember when we used to cook together?" she asked. I mumbled something about deadlines and city permits while checking my emails. Classic boneheaded move. The real kicker? I started noticing changes in her work too. Rebecca had always been known for her warm, inviting designs, spaces that felt like home the moment you walked in. But her recent projects? They were all sharp angles and cold minimalism. Like she was designing the emptiness she felt at home into her work. Talk about your architectural metaphors slapping you in the face. Our home, this place I'd spent months designing to be our perfect space, started feeling more like a showroom than a living space. Everything was still beautiful, still exactly where I'd planned it, but the life was gone. Kind of like our marriage, I guess. The projects kept coming, bigger and more demanding. I landed a contract for an entire sustainable business district, my shot at reshaping an entire section of Chicago. I was on cloud nine, riding high on professional success, while my personal life was sinking faster than a building with a bad foundation. I started sleeping in my home office more nights than not. It was easier than facing the empty side of our bed or the silent treatment over breakfast. Rebecca stopped asking about my day, stopped sharing her design ideas, stopped trying to be part of my world. And like an idiot, I thought it was just a phase, just the natural ebb and flow of a marriage between two busy professionals. But here's the thing about being an architect. We're trained to notice patterns, to see how things connect. I should have noticed how she started dressing up more for client meetings. Should have questioned why her phone was always face down now. Should have wondered why she suddenly needed her own office space downtown when she'd always loved working from home. Instead, I kept my head down, focused on my drawings and models, telling myself I was building our future. Turns out, I was just designing the perfect space for our marriage to fall apart. But I hadn't hit rock bottom yet. Oh no, that was still coming, and it would shake my foundations in ways I never saw coming. They say a smart architect always has a backup plan. Well, I finally decided to put on my big boy pants and fix what was broken. After all, that's what I do for a living: solve problems, make things work, turn ideas into reality. I just wrapped up a major presentation for the Eco Skyscraper project. The client loved it, the city approved it, everything was golden. For once, I decided to leave the office before midnight. I had a plan, a real, pull out all the stops kind of evening to reconnect with Rebecca. I called her favorite restaurant, this cozy Italian place in Lincoln Park where we had our first date. Pulled some strings to get our old table by the window. Ordered a bottle of that fancy Barolo she loves. Even picked up flowers from that little shop she always raves about. On my way home, I got this text that made my stomach do backflips. "Working late tonight. Don't wait up." Classic Rebecca these days. But I wasn't going to let it slide this time. I drove to her office downtown, thinking I'd surprise her. The security guard knew me. I designed the building's renovation. "Mrs. Walker left about an hour ago," he said, giving me this look I couldn't quite read. Said she had a client meeting at the Drake. Instead of following her, I went home and decided to do what I do best: make plans. I spent hours sketching out ideas for our rooftop garden, something I'd promised Rebecca years ago, but never got around to. It would be perfect, a private oasis above the city, with those curved benches she loves, and a vertical herb garden for her cooking. When she finally came home around 11, smelling of wine and wearing a dress I'd never seen before, I was surrounded by drawings and samples. I looked up, trying to ignore the lipstick that seemed fresher than it had been this morning. "What's all this?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "I thought it was time to make good on my promise," I said, holding up the sketches. "Remember how we always talked about having our own little piece of heaven up here?" She looked at the drawings, and for a moment, I saw a flicker of the old Rebecca. But then something shifted in her eyes. "It's a bit late for garden plans, isn't it?" she said, dropping her bag on the counter. "In more ways than one." I showed her the materials I'd picked out, talked about the sustainable features, even mentioned how we could use it for client entertaining. She listened, nodding in all the right places, but I could tell she wasn't really there. "It's beautiful, Daniel," she finally said. "Your designs always are. But maybe we need to focus on rebuilding something else first." Standing there, surrounded by my perfectly rendered plans for a garden that would never exist, I realized that maybe some things couldn't be fixed with blueprints and elegant designs. But I wasn't ready to throw in the towel yet. I still had one more play, one more chance to shore up the foundations of our marriage before everything came crashing down. Sometimes the worst structural failures happen not with a bang, but with a whisper. In my case, it was the whisper of my wife's wine-loosened tongue at our firm's annual gala. The event was being held at my latest completed project, a renovated historic building downtown. Everyone who was anyone in Chicago's architectural scene was there. I'd spent weeks making sure every detail was perfect, right down to the lighting that highlighted the restored Art Deco features. Rebecca looked stunning in a black dress I'd never seen before. She was on her fourth glass of champagne, holding court with a group of junior designers from rival firms. I was across the room, discussing sustainable materials with potential clients, when I caught fragments of her conversation. "He's so predictable," she was saying, her words slightly slurred. "All straight lines and perfect angles. Sometimes a girl needs curves, you know?" The young architects laughed nervously, clearly uncomfortable. I made my way over, but she didn't notice me approaching. "God, you should see him with his precious blueprints. That's basically his idea of foreplay. At least Jason knows how to—" She stopped dead when she saw me. The group scattered like startled pigeons, leaving us alone in a bubble of awkward silence despite the crowded room. "Who's Jason?" I asked quietly, already knowing the answer would destroy everything. Rebecca straightened up, swaying slightly. The champagne had stripped away her usual careful facade. "Jason Thompson, from Thompson & Associates." She laughed, a bitter sound that echoed off the marble walls I'd so carefully restored. "He's designing more than just buildings with me." The name hit me like a sledgehammer. Thompson & Associates, our biggest competitors. The firm that had been mysteriously winning bids with designs that felt strangely familiar. Now I knew why. "How long?" My voice sounded distant, like it was coming through layers of acoustic insulation. "Long enough," she said, taking another sip of champagne. "He gets me, Daniel. He doesn't just see the structure, he sees the soul. When was the last time you really saw me?" I stood there, in this building I'd poured my heart into, surrounded by the cream of Chicago's architectural society, and felt everything crumbling around me. All those late client meetings, the sudden business trips, the new clothes. The blueprint of her betrayal had been right in front of me all along. "Does he know you're using him to steal my designs?" I asked calmly. Her face flushed. "Is that all you care about? Your precious designs? God, you're so professional. Even now, even finding out your wife is sleeping with someone else, you're worried about intellectual property." She was right. I was staying professional. Because beneath my calm exterior, calculations were already running through my head. Not architectural calculations this time, but the ones that would dismantle my marriage with the same precision I used to design buildings. "You should go home," I said quietly. "You've had too much to drink." "Home?" She laughed again. "That perfectly designed mausoleum you created? No thanks. I think I'll call Jason. He has a much better idea of what I need." As she walked away, stumbling slightly in her heels, I pulled out my phone and called my lawyer's emergency number. It was time to start drafting a different kind of blueprint, one that would protect more than just my intellectual property. I've always believed that the mark of a true architect isn't just in what they build, but in how they handle demolition. Sometimes, you need to tear something down completely before you can build something new. That night, after the gala, I sat in my home office until dawn, planning the most important demolition of my life. Rebecca didn't come home. Not that I expected her to. Her drunken confession about Jason Thompson kept playing in my head like a corrupted CAD file, glitching and repeating. I pulled up my laptop and started making lists, methodical, detailed, just like I would for any other project. First, I checked our joint accounts. The numbers told their own story. Regular charges at hotels I'd never visited, restaurants I'd never eaten at. Funny how expense reports can read like a diary of betrayal. I noticed large transfers to a private account I didn't recognize. Seems like my wife had been building her own escape route. My phone kept buzzing with messages from concerned colleagues who'd witnessed her meltdown at the gala. I ignored them all. Instead, I pulled up the files for every project I'd worked on in the past year. Now I understood why Thompson and Associates' recent designs had felt so familiar. They were bastardized versions of my work. Around 3 a.m., I started drafting emails. To my lawyer, my accountant, key members of my firm. No emotional language, just facts and action items. Like writing project specifications, but for dismantling a marriage. I thought about confronting her, having it out in some dramatic showdown. But what would be the point? In architecture, when a structure is compromised beyond repair, you don't waste time arguing with it. You document the damage, make your plans, and move forward with demolition. The sun was rising over the Chicago skyline. My skyline, the one I'd helped shape when I made my final decision. There would be no dramatic confrontation, no heated arguments, no desperate attempts to rebuild something that had been rotting from the inside all along. Instead, I would do what I do best: execute a perfectly planned exit strategy. Every architect knows that the key to a successful project is proper preparation. Well, this would be my masterpiece. I looked around my office at the awards on the walls, the framed blueprints of my most successful projects. Rebecca had helped me hang them back when we first moved in. "These are your dreams made real," she'd said then. Now I wondered if she'd been laughing at me even then. My phone buzzed again, a text from Rebecca. "We need to talk." I didn't respond. In construction, when you discover severe structural damage, you don't discuss it with the building. You just make your plans and execute them. By the time the city was fully awake, I had my blueprint for dissolution mapped out. Clean, efficient, methodical. Just like every other project I'd ever tackled. Only this time, I wasn't building something to last. I was planning my own disappearance. Every successful demolition requires 3 things: precise timing, careful preparation, and attention to detail. I applied these principles to my exit strategy with the same methodical precision I used in my architectural projects. First call was to James Morrison, my lawyer. "I need everything ready by tomorrow morning," I told him. And I mean everything. Divorce papers, injunctions to protect my intellectual property, full documentation of the design theft. Next was my accountant, Sarah Chun. She'd been handling my finances since my first successful project. "Transfer everything to separate accounts," I instructed. "But make it clean, make it legal. I want this to be bulletproof." I spent the morning documenting everything. Downloaded bank statements, copied emails, backed up all my design files. The evidence of Rebecca's betrayal and Thompson's design theft was like laying out construction documents. Everything in its place. Every detail noted. Then I called my firm's board members, one by one. Explained the situation with Thompson and Associates, the stolen designs, the breach of trust. They were shocked, but supportive. "Take whatever time you need," the senior partner said. "We'll handle the Eco Skyscraper project." I had my IT guy quietly remove Rebecca's access to all my work servers. Change passwords on everything: email, cloud storage, even our home security system. Like securing a construction site before demolition. Around noon, I visited 4 different banks. Opened new accounts. Transferred assets. Closed joint credit cards. The tellers probably thought I was paranoid, but in architecture, you learn that redundancy is crucial for stability. My brother Tom called. Rebecca had been trying to reach me through him. "She's a mess, Dan," he said. "Says it was a drunk mistake, that she didn't mean it." I cut him off. "Don't tell her anything about me from now on," I said. "That's all I'm asking." I booked a suite at the Peninsula Hotel under a different name. Packed what I needed: clothes, laptop, essential documents. Left my wedding ring on my drafting table, right next to the rooftop garden plans I'd drawn up just days ago. Before leaving, I did one final thing. Wrote a brief note to the senior partners. I'm taking a leave of absence. You'll understand why when you see tomorrow's legal filings. The eco skyscraper designs are in the secure server, password in the sealed envelope on my desk. Don't let Thompson anywhere near them. By sunset, everything was in place. Like a well-planned construction project, every detail had been considered, every contingency planned for. Tomorrow, the demolition would begin. The thing about demolition is that once you start, there's no going back. The divorce papers hit Rebecca like a wrecking ball first thing Monday morning. My lawyer didn't just file for divorce. He filed injunctions against Thompson and Associates for intellectual property theft, complete with documentation of every borrowed design element. The news spread through Chicago's architectural community like wildfire. Rebecca tried everything to reach me: calls, texts, emails, even camping out in my firm's lobby. But I'd built my walls high and strong this time. "Please, Daniel, we can fix this," she begged in one of her 100 voicemails. It was a stupid mistake. Jason meant nothing. But you can't fix a compromised foundation. Any architect knows that. The media caught wind of the story. Star architect's wife in design theft scandal made headlines in the architectural journals. Thompson and Associates' reputation took a nosedive. Turned out Rebecca wasn't the only one who'd have to pay for their choices. My lawyer kept me updated. Rebecca hired some hotshot divorce attorney, but the evidence was too solid. The prenup I'd insisted on, calling an architect's attention to detail, was watertight. Still, I offered her a generous settlement. Not out of kindness. I just wanted this demolition completed quickly and cleanly. She fought it at first, claiming she'd helped build my career, that she deserved half of everything. But when my lawyer presented evidence of her involvement in the design theft, she changed her tune. Amazing how fast someone's position can shift when they realize they're standing on unstable ground. The settlement negotiations were like value engineering a project, cutting away everything unnecessary until only the essential structure remained. In the end, she got the house. I couldn't stand to look at it anyway, a fair financial package, and her freedom to be with her precious Jason. Funny thing, though, Thompson and Associates fired him once the scandal broke. Turns out firms don't like architects who steal designs, even if they're sleeping with the competition's wife. Last I heard, he was trying to rebuild his reputation in Minneapolis. Good luck with that. Throughout it all, I stayed focused on my work. Threw myself into the eco skyscraper project, refined every detail until it was perfect. The divorce papers came back signed after 6 weeks. Just like that, the demolition was complete. My colleagues try to take me out, celebrate my freedom, but you don't celebrate a demolition. You just clean up the site and prepare for the next project. Time has a way of revealing structural weaknesses. It's been 2 years since the divorce, and while I've rebuilt my life, Rebecca's has been crumbling like a poorly constructed building. I heard about it all through the architectural grapevine. You know how this industry loves its gossip. After Thompson got blacklisted, Rebecca tried to leverage her connections to help him start his own firm. Poured all her settlement money into it. Rookie mistake. Investing everything into a foundation that's already cracked. The firm lasted 6 months before going under. Turns out nobody wants to hire an architect known for stealing designs. Thompson split from Minneapolis when the money ran dry, leaving Rebecca with nothing but debt and a reputation as damaged as his. She tried to rebuild her interior design business, but Chicago's architecture community has a long memory. Former clients mysteriously found other designers. Her phone stopped ringing. Even her old friends in the industry started avoiding her. Nobody wanted to risk their professional reputation by association. The house she got in the settlement? Had to sell it. Couldn't afford the maintenance on her dwindling income. Last I heard, she's renting a small condo in Wicker Park, quite a step down from the penthouse we designed together. The irony? She's been trying to pitch a comeback story to architectural magazines. Something about finding herself through design after betrayal. But here's the thing about our industry. We care more about structural integrity than dramatic narratives. One of our mutual friends, well, my friend now, told me she ran into Rebecca at a design conference. Said she looked rough, trying to network, but getting politely shut out of every conversation. Apparently, she'd been drinking too much, talking about how she'd lost everything for nothing. She even tried to get a job at my firm. Can you believe the nerve? Sent her portfolio to our HR department under her maiden name. Our hiring manager recognized her work and sent back a polite, no thanks. Some foundations are too damaged to build on. The settlement money's gone now, burned through by bad investments and Thompson's failed firm. She's been taking small residential projects, the kind of work she used to turn down. How the mighty fall, right? The last straw? She showed up at the opening ceremony for my eco skyscraper, trying to claim she'd contributed to the original concept. Security escorted her out. It was kind of sad, really, watching her try to cling to a past she destroyed. You reap what you sow in this business. Every choice is like a load-bearing wall. Make the wrong one, and everything comes crashing down. They say architects should always expect the unexpected, but nothing in my blueprints prepared me for this moment. 5 years after the divorce, life had found its new rhythm. I'd moved to Seattle, started my own firm, and was making waves with sustainable urban development projects. I was back in Chicago for the International Architecture Expo, where I was giving a keynote speech about green architecture. The event was being held in one of my buildings. Ironic, right? My latest Seattle project had just won a major sustainability award, and my firm was expanding rapidly. After my speech, I was in the hotel bar, celebrating with some colleagues. That's when I saw her. Rebecca was sitting alone at the end of the bar, nursing what looked like her third martini. She'd aged, not badly, but noticeably. The confident sparkle I'd once fallen for had dimmed to a desperate glimmer. She spotted me before I could make a graceful exit. Our eyes met across the room, and for a moment, I was transported back to that gala where everything fell apart. She got up, wobbling slightly in her heels, and made her way over. "Danny," she said, using the nickname I'd always hated. "You look good. Success suits you." Her words were slightly slurred, her designer dress a season out of date. "Rebecca," I nodded, keeping my voice professionally neutral, like I was addressing a difficult client. "I trust you're well?" She laughed, a bitter sound that drew looks from nearby patrons. "Well, I'm just peachy. Living the dream, you know? Working on small residential projects while you're out there winning awards and changing skylines." My colleagues tactfully excused themselves, leaving us in an awkward bubble of tension. She took another sip of her martini, her hand trembling slightly. "I messed up, Danny. I know that now. Jason was... God, what a mistake. Did you know he's married now? To some young interior designer in Minneapolis." She tried to smile, but it came out more like a grimace. "The funny thing is," she continued, "I had it all. A beautiful life, a talented husband, a future that was going to be amazing. But I got greedy. Wanted more excitement, more drama. What an idiot, right?" I stayed silent, letting her words fall into the space between us like debris from a controlled demolition. She reached for my hand, but I smoothly stepped back. "We could try again," she whispered. "I've changed. I know what I lost now. We were good together, weren't we? Before I ruined it all." Looking at her, I felt nothing but a distant pity, like looking at an abandoned building marked for demolition. "No, Rebecca," I said quietly. "We can't rebuild something that's been completely demolished. Some sites are better left cleared." She flinched as if I'd struck her. "You're so cold now," she said. "So professional." "I learned from the best," I replied, finishing my drink. "Goodbye, Rebecca. Take care of yourself." As I walked away, I heard her call after me, her voice cracking. "I still love you, Danny. But love is like architecture. Without a solid foundation, it's just a house of cards waiting to fall." That encounter with Rebecca in the hotel bar should have shaken me, but instead, it gave me something I hadn't realized I needed: closure. After I left her there, I walked through downtown Chicago, past buildings I'd designed, others I'd dreamed of designing, and some I was glad I'd never touched. The city lights reflected off the glass and steel surfaces, creating a symphony of light and shadow that only architects truly appreciate. I found myself stopping in front of my eco skyscraper, now a recognized landmark of sustainable architecture. Standing there, I had an epiphany. Every building starts with a vision, but it's the execution that matters. Rebecca had been like a beautiful concept drawing that didn't translate to reality. All style, no substance. The foundation had been flawed from the start, but I'd been too in love with the design to see it. My phone buzzed. A text from my current partner, Claire, a structural engineer I'd met in Seattle. "How did the keynote go?" she asked. I smiled, thinking about how different this relationship was. Claire understood that creation takes time, that proper foundations need proper care. Looking up at my building one last time, I realized something profound. The betrayal hadn't destroyed me. It had forced me to rebuild myself, better and stronger. Like retrofitting an old building with modern materials, I'd taken what was good from my past and reinforced it with hard-earned wisdom. I texted Claire back. "Keynote went well. But more importantly, I'm finally ready to start that joint project we've been discussing." She knew what I meant. We'd been talking about marriage, but I'd been hesitant, haunted by architectural ghosts. They say architects never really finish a building, they just stop working on it. But sometimes, you need to complete one project before you can start another. Walking away from that building, from Chicago, from the last remnants of my life with Rebecca, I knew I was ready to break ground on something new. The future stretched out before me like an empty lot ready for development. This time, though, I had better plans, stronger materials, and a partner who understood that the most beautiful structures are the ones built with integrity. Some people might call it karma, how everything turned out. But in architecture, we know better. It's not karma, it's just good design principles at work. You reap what you build.